Tēnā koutou e tēnei ata. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Techweek online presentation, From Settlement to City. The Wanganui District Council Archives Historic Rate Records Database Project. The Wanganui District Council is very aware of the importance of its historical information and has made a conscious effort to preserve its archives and then make them available to the public. The transcription of these rate records has made an outstanding contribution to this process. It provides access to a large body of information at no cost to the local community. In May 2021, the Whanganui District Council added this historic rate record and valuation roll database to its website as an online resource for all our customers. The database is a record of early residents and their properties in Wanganui. It also documents Wanganui's growth and development as an urban settlement since the mid-19th century until the 1920s. This is a volunteer project administered by Council Archives with support from the New Zealand Society of Genealogists Wanganui branch and Te Rerenga Mai o Te Kauru, the Alexander Heritage and Research Library here in Wanganui. The database contains over 125,000 individually transcribed rate records and valuation roll details, and it covers a time period between 1862 and 1928. Rates and valuation roll records have been created for as long as local authorities have existed in New Zealand. Originally, rating in Aotearoa was determined by whatever legislation was passed to allow the creation of a particular local authority. In 1876, the process was made uniform for all local authorities with the passing of the New Zealand Rating Act 1876. This Act laid out all the requirements for any local authority that levied rates. The Wanganui Town Board rate and valuation rolls, dating from 1863 to 1872, are some of the earliest New Zealand local authority archives available in a digital format to the public. Rate books and valuation records are primarily used by people to find out where their ancestors lived or whoever previously owned their particular property. The other great sources of information for this type of research can be found in historical postal and telephone directories. Also by requesting a historical certificate of title search from LINZ. This search will provide a complete list of owners for individual properties. For this particular project, historical Wanganui rate records and valuation roll details have been transcribed by the team from the archives of the following local Wanganui bodies. The Wanganui Town Board, which was in existence between 1862 and 1872, the Wanganui Borough Council, which existed between 1872 and 1923, the Wanganui East Town Board, which operated between 1906 and 1912, the Gonville Town Board, 1907 to 1924, the Castlecliff Town Board, 1909 to 1924, and particular Wanganui City Council rate records between 1924 and 1928. The launch of this digital database resource has been a success. Success here can be measured in terms of the connections made with our heritage communities and other clients. Clients not only utilise the Wanganui District Council archives, but are also connected with our unique Alexander Heritage and Research Library Heritage Collection and our staff and wonderful volunteers. Historical rate records provide links and associations to family histories and genealogy, and vice versa. Our online statistics show that the database has been well utilised by the public in the first 12 months it has been available. The database is also of particular interest to people undertaking genealogical, historical property or local history research. These rate and valuation records are part of the Wanganui District Council archive. So let's talk about the Wanganui District Council archives collection. Although there is evidence, archives held in our collection, relating to the existence of earlier road boards, local governance in the Wanganui district effectively began in 1862. The first council established here was the Wanganui Town Board. It's interesting to note that Wanganui was initially a township in 1862. It was then a borough in 1872, and then in 1924, a city. In 1924, when various suburban authorities amalgamated with the Wanganui Borough Council, the town then had the required population numbers, the demographic, to become a city. So let's look at this. Back in 1924, a town was classed as a city when it reached a population of 20,000. Since 1989, a town has needed 50,000 people to have the status of a city. We note that the suburban authorities that amalgamated with the Wanganui Borough Council were the Castlecliff, Gonville and Wanganui East, previously known as Eastbrook, town boards. Further local authority amalgamations took place in 1989 as part of national local body reforms, when the former Waitotara and Wanganui County Councils, along with the Wanganui Harbour Board, merged with the Wanganui City to form the present Wanganui District. The Wanganui District Council archives reflect the administrative history of our district, with a large collection of protected records dating from 1862 to the present. Our archive provides evidence of the development of Wanganui's infrastructure, its transport systems, its water supply, sewerage systems, and our parks and buildings, etc. Harbour Board records provide detail of the ships that used the port in its heyday. Survey plans show the roads that opened up the rural areas to settlers. Minute books record the decisions and actions of these various authorities and their interactions with the communities that they served. Rating and valuation records provide lists of early residents and their properties. So here is my beginner's guide to the history of Wanganui. Wanganui has a long history of settlement and is rich in terms of historical information and archives. Wanganui, the name, means big harbour, although another version is long wait. The town is mostly known as the River City. Wanganui is situated at the mouth of the Wanganui River on the west coast of the North Island of New Zealand. It is the ancestral home to Whanganui iwi, Te Ati Hawanui a Paparangi. Land here was gained for settlement from local iwi by two large land purchases. The first purchase in 1840 was by the New Zealand Company. There was a later purchase in 1848 by the new settler government. This latter purchase included surveys and also had land set aside as native reserve. Wanganui is one of New Zealand's oldest cities. It was originally known as Pita and acquired its first European settlers in the 1840s. It is spelt P-E-T-R-E, but is pronounced as Peter, and it is named after the New Zealand Company director, Lord Peter. It was the New Zealand Company's second settlement and began as an adjunct of the first, Te Whanganui Atara, Wellington, in 1840. Wanganui was chosen because the New Zealand Company did not have enough land at Wellington to provide immigrants with the sections that they had been promised. The official name change to Wanganui took place on the 20th of January 1854. With a port, a relatively central location, and fertile surrounding land, Wanganui became for a time one of New Zealand's major towns. In 1924, Wanganui was New Zealand's 5th largest urban area outside of the 4 main centres. Since the 1930s, it has lost that status with the greater use of road and rail transport, centralisation of shipping at the main ports, and the faster growth of other central North Island provincial cities. Optimism, a diversified economy and urban growth has seen the town grow in the last few decades. I'd now like to look at the history of this project. This volunteer project has been undertaken in 2 parts. Project team number 1, and this team operated between 1994 and 1999. In 1994, several members of the New Zealand Society of Genealogists, Whanganui branch, started a project alongside the Wanganui District Council to transcribe the details of 40 volumes of early Wanganui valuation rolls. These Wanganui Town Board valuation rolls were large parchment sheets which were in poor condition. They would require conservation treatment before they could be photographed and then transcribed. New Zealand Lotteries grant funding allocated to the project at the time enabled the conservation work on these delicate valuation parchment sheets to be undertaken by professionals. This was completed at the time along with the necessary photography of these valuation rolls for the transcription team and for our future reference. The original Wanganui District Council Archivist Penny Allen and her assistant Jerry O'Mahony provided support and direction for this initial project, which ran between 1994 and 1999. Without the drive, tenacity, support, and tireless work of previous council archivist Penny Allen, this first project would not have got off the ground. So thank you, Penny. This initial project focused on the Wanganui Town Board valuation rolls and the Wanganui Borough Council rate records. The rate records transcribed here originally covered the period 1862 until 1922. Between 1994 and 1999, an incredible 80,630 individual rate records were transcribed by this team. I'd like to also acknowledge the sterling and dedicated work here of June Springer, Joan Egan, Jill Gilbertson, Julie Ball, Don Clark, Angela Gate, Barry Nixon, Grace Phillips, Barbara Scholes, and Randall Springer. I'd now like to talk about the second phase of the project, which began in 2018. So, following significant interest from heritage staff, volunteers, and members of the public, I chaired a meeting of all interested parties, and this project resumed in 2018, in June, some 18 years later after the initial efforts. Following this meeting, a project plan and sponsors were finalised, and our wonderful team of volunteers then commenced the transcription work at the Wanganui District Council Archives site for 2 days every week. The aim of this project, part 2, was to digitise further rate records up until 1924. We also wanted to make the database available to the public to research. To enable this to happen, all existing data, the 80,650 records, were transferred from the existing Database 4 application to our current Google platform, and this was undertaken in April 2021. This database has been available to the public since May 2021. The second phase of this project has focused on the rate records of the Eastbrook Wanganui East Town Board, 1906 to 1912, the Castlecliff Town Board, 1909 to 1924, the Gonville Town Board, 1907 to 1924, and certain Wanganui City Council rate records covering the period 1924 to 1928. This project team are now completing this digitised urban Wanganui rate records database, which will, in effect, now cover additionally the period 1906 to 1928. We have extended the time scope of the project to 1928 to provide further details of property ownership here and to trace the growth of the Wanganui urban area in the first years of it being a city, 1924 to 1928. We also, again, wanted to include the rate records of Wanganui East, Castlecliff and Gomble to provide our clients then with a complete urban record database from 1862 to 1928, some 66 years. These records really do capture the development of urban Wanganui, the original suburbs and the settlers, the early residents and families, and the businesses and institutions that once owned and occupied these properties. The dedicated members of this current project team are June Springer, Francis Haddock, Nola Clark, Sue O'Connor, and Sonia Wooding. This team have digitised and checked to date an additional 41,000 individual rate records since June 2018. They never cease to amaze me. They are an incredible team. So in total, over 125,000 rate records have been digitised and are now available to the public to research. Another very pleasing outcome of the project are the conservation gains achieved in relation to these archives. In the initial phase of the project, the most fragile valuation rolls here underwent conservation treatment by Jocelyn Cumming at the New Zealand Conservation Centre for Books and Archives. The real beauty of digitised collections such as this is that the original rate books and valuation rolls no longer have to be handled to access the valuable information of which they contain. So what else did we learn from these historical rate records? Some points of interest here. In the mid-19th century, changes of ownership of land were frequent. Military men who took their discharge in Wanganui owned many of the sections. In the early valuation rolls, the town is divided into 3 wards: Cook's, Queen's and St John's. Areas beyond the town urban area are described as suburban blocks. We note that street names have changed over the years and some of the earlier names are no longer used. Streets of Wanganui by Athol Kirk, there's 2 editions of this, 1978 and 1989, is a very helpful reference tool in locating the street name changes. Spelling of surnames in some of the original records is not always accurate. Where known, the correct surname has been given as well in the record notes. Interesting to also note that women's names appear quite frequently as properties were often purchased in their names. This was a measure used in protection against bankruptcy, which is very interesting. The industrial school estate and college estate are older terms for the present-day Wanganui Collegiate School area. What I'd like to do now is talk about some of the rate records categories that you will find on the database. Owner-occupiers. In the database records, the occupier is the person who paid the rates and the owner has the freehold title. Very often the same name appears for both owner and occupier. Rates. Rates are usually based on either the property's land value, capital value, or a fixed charge applied to each separately used or inhabited part of a rating unit. Rates amount paid. They are shown as pounds, shillings, and pence. The pound fractional system, as you will probably know, was the currency of New Zealand from 1840 until 1967, when it was replaced by the New Zealand dollar, the decimal currency. A pound was worth 20 shillings and a shilling was worth 12 pence. So 1 pound was worth 240 pence. There is also a field for valuation numbers, and we note that the valuation number is not a permanent identifier for a property, and that the same property may have a different valuation number in different years. The council field recorded here are the local authorities that were administering the collection of specific rates. We also look at archives references. So an AAF record series is Wanganui Borough, Wanganui City Council. The numerical reference 65 denotes a rate book series number, and number 15, for example, would be the individual rate book volume number. One of the most important fields here in locating a particular property is the legal description. A legal description is the geographical description of real estate that identifies its precise location, boundaries, and any easements for the purposes of a legal transaction, such as a change or transfer of ownership. Other notes of interest. So this project has focused on digitising rate records from the Wanganui urban areas only. The database does not include rate records from our outlying rural areas, these being the records of the former Waitotara County Council and the Wanganui County Council. However, these county rate records are available in hard copy format, and if you wish to view any of these records, please get in touch with me. To aid customers in finding the actual location of a specific property, we have added to the site historical maps of Wanganui, dated 1862, 1903, and 1909. These plans are helpful to the researcher as property locations are referenced in the database by a legal description, not a physical street address number. Tips for searching the database. We recommend that you limit your search to a single field initially, or try searching for a single surname or street first. I would also like here to acknowledge the valuable assistance of Greg Titchbon of the Wanganui District Council IT team. COVID-19 restrictions and lockdowns have actually not affected this project's progress as one may have expected. This is because the team have been able to work remotely from home, transcribing rate records from photocopies or photographs through 2 lockdowns and various traffic light settings. It is interesting to note that more records have been digitised and checked by the team while we have been in lockdown than there were when the team were working from the archive site at Archives here. These volunteers cannot be stopped, and they continue every week to digitise the remaining records of the Castlecliff and Gonville town boards. I'd like to now look at some published books of relevance to this project. The first one of these books is Town Board by Felicity Campbell. It covers the independent years of Eastbrook, Gonville, and Castlecliff. Several years ago, noted Wanganui author and historian Felicity Campbell was approached by the Wanganui District Council Archives to carry on the late Randall Springer's project of examining the minute books of the boards of Gonville, Castlecliff, and Wanganui East when they were independent local bodies. On completion of her research, this wonderful book was published in 2016. This book is a culmination of many hours of dedicated research and numerous visits to our archives to view these historic town board minute books and associated archives. The antiquated minute books utilised here by Felicity are handwritten in fountain scroll ink and can be quite difficult to read, but this didn't faze Felicity at all. The book is a summary of these boards and the development of these suburbs. The book is not intended as a full suburban history. These elected town boards had their own bylaws. They built their own town halls, which are still in existence today at Whanganui East, Gonville and Castlecliff. They also applied their own valuation and rating systems on which this project is based. Many of the challenges that these tiny local authorities faced were huge in technological and rating terms, but they were all attempted. They all began with a few clay roads, but when they joined the borough, there were metal roads, footpath, water, gas, and some sewage services. To note, Wanganui East, Eastbrook joined the Wanganui Borough in 1912. Gonville and Castlecliff town boards joined the borough in 1924. The Wanganui suburbs of Aramaho and St John's Hill were originally part of the Waitotara County Council district. St John's Hill joined the Wanganui Borough in 1909, followed by Aramaho in 1910. Another noted local author, Lorraine Soul, has produced books relating to the suburban histories of a number of Wanganui suburbs. Her books include Aramaho, Gonville, Castlecliff and Upakanaro. She has also published books relating to a number of other rural communities in our district and South Taranaki. Randall Springer, as previously mentioned, has also written a history of the various road boards that preceded the Wanganui Town Board in 1862, and these road board histories are available on request. I'd just like to talk about how you can access this rates records database. It's on the Wanganui District Council website. If you go into that website and in the below fields, you'll find your council, below that about the Wanganui District, and there's a link to the Wanganui District Council archives, which includes the historical rate records database. Wanganui District Council is a member of Archives Central, which is a local authority shared services initiative. Archives Central is a searchable database of the collection of 9 regional and district council archives sourced from participating New Zealand local authorities. Archives Central has made council archives available for both the community and council staff. I note the contributing councils or members of the LAS are the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, the Horowhenua District Council, Ruapehu District Council, Horizons Regional Council, Manawatu District Council, Rangatiki District Council, Tararua District Council. Palmerston North City Council and Wanganui District Council also belong to Archive Central, but have their own repositories located in Palmerston North and Wanganui. For those of you who would like to get in contact with me, my email is simon.bloor@wanganui.govt.nz. You'll find a link to email me within the Wanganui District Council website. My landline number is 06 349 3056 and my cell is 027 441 8125. I would also welcome your queries regarding the database and any feedback you may have in terms of improving the database and content. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe. Thank you very much for attending this presentation.